Hey everyone, welcome back. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from today. Let me know in the comments. We're pushing towards 10k subscribers by next year, and every like and comment helps share our videos with more awesome people like you. Now, let's dive in. Fleet Commander Zixathar stood at the command center of the Krylaxian flagship, Eternal Dominance, his four eyes fixed on the holographic display before him. His scaled skin reflected the soft purple lighting of the bridge as he studied the anomalous reading that had caught his scout ship's attention. The object drifted through the void between the Carina and Perseus arms of the galaxy, a dark silhouette against the backdrop of distant stars. Magnification increased, Commander, announced First Observer Krell. The image sharpened, and a collective hiss of recognition rippled through the bridge crew. The vessel's design was unmistakable. Human. The ship was massive, nearly 2 kilometers in length, its hull a testament to humanity's architectural grandiosity. It resembled what the humans would have called a Gothic cathedral, but stretched and twisted into a military vessel, with flying buttresses of titanium alloy and spires that housed what must have once been weapon systems. The hull was marked with elaborate decorative elements that seemed unnecessary for a warship. Gargoyles crafted from aerospace-grade metals, their grotesque faces forever frozen in silent screams, and intricate patterns that spoke of an aesthetic sensibility that the Krylaxians had never understood about their former enemies. Battle scars marred its once proud surface, evidence of the Great War that had driven humanity to the brink of extinction 75 years ago. Massive gashes in the hull plating exposed internal structures to the vacuum of space, while impact craters from Krylaxian plasma weapons created a constellation of their own across the ship's surface. Scanning for energy signatures, reported Second Observer Mhex, her clawed fingers dancing across the control interface. Nothing. The vessel appears to be completely dormant. Zixathar moved closer to the hologram, his secondary heart beating faster with anticipation. Identify, he commanded. The ship's AI processed the request, comparing the vessel's configuration against historical records. After several moments, text appeared above the image. USS Hyperion. The Hyperion? Krell's voice carried a note of awe. Commander, this vessel was reported destroyed during the Battle of Proxima Centauri. It was their flagship, the pride of their fleet. Zixathar remembered the stories. The Hyperion had been more than just a warship. It had been the pinnacle of human military engineering, incorporating technologies that even the Krylaxian Empire hadn't fully understood. Its disappearance had been celebrated as the final victory over humanity, marking the end of their resistance and the beginning of their exile to the outer edges of known space. Prepare a boarding party, Zixathar ordered, his voice steady despite his excitement. Full environmental suits and weapons. I want a complete sweep of that vessel. Commander, Mex interjected, protocol dictates that any human military vessel should be destroyed on sight. The Empire's laws are clear about this. Zixathar turned all four eyes toward her. The war is over. Second Observer. The humans are barely surviving on their colonies' worlds, their technology reduced to pre-spaceflight levels. This ship is nothing more than a derelict, a relic of a dead civilization. Its technology could be valuable to the Empire. The boarding party assembled in the launch bay, 12 of the fleet's best soldiers, led by veteran hunter Vexka. They wore the latest in Krylaxian environmental armor, sleek suits that enhanced their natural abilities while protecting them from the vacuum of space and any lingering human defense systems. As the boarding shuttle approached the Hyperion, the true scale of the vessel became apparent. The shuttle was dwarfed by even the smallest of the ship's defense turrets. Up close, the Gothic architecture was even more unsettling. The metal gargoyles seemed to track the shuttle's movement, their empty eyes holding secrets from a bygone era. By the Emperor's crest, whispered one of the soldiers. How did they build something like this? The shuttle's sensors identified a viable entry point, a damaged hangar bay with enough structural integrity to allow for safe docking. As they maneuvered inside, their lights illuminated a graveyard of small craft. Human fighters, shuttles, and maintenance vehicles, all covered in a thick layer of frost. The boarding party disembarked, their magnetic boots connecting with the hangar deck with dull thuds that echoed through the cavernous space. Emergency lighting still functioned at minimal levels, casting everything in a deep, red glow that turned the frost-covered surfaces into fields of crystallized blood. "Teams of 3, ordered Vexica. "Standard sweep pattern. Maintain constant communication. Remember your training. Human vessels are known for their redundant systems and hidden defenses." The team spread out, moving through the ship's frozen corridors. The Hyperion's interior was a maze of passages decorated with the same Gothic motifs as its exterior. Religious imagery merged seamlessly with military functionality. Angels carved into bulkheads clutched power conduits in their hands, and what appeared to be artistic panels concealed access to the ship's systems. Vexica's team reached the bridge first. The massive command center was a cathedral unto itself, with vaulted ceilings disappearing into darkness above. Frost-covered control stations formed concentric circles around a central command platform, where a single chair stood like a throne. "Command, we've reached the bridge," Vexica reported. "No signs of..." "Wait!" His infrared sensors had picked up something, a faint heat signature coming from behind one of the walls. "There's something here." The wall panel slid aside with surprising ease, revealing a hidden chamber. Inside, rows of cylindrical containers lined the walls, each filled with a cloudy fluid that had partially frozen. And floating within each container was a human, perfectly preserved. "Command, we found the crew," Vexica transmitted, his voice tight with tension. "They're in some kind of suspended animation, hundreds of them." In the command center of the Eternal Dominance, Zixthar received the transmission with growing excitement. A preserved human crew, along with their advanced vessel. This was beyond anything he could have hoped for. This discovery would earn him accolades throughout the Empire. But as he watched the boarding party's feeds, something caught his attention. In one frame, just for a moment, he thought he saw one of the supposedly dormant crew members' eyes open, revealing not human eyes, but something else entirely. "Vexica," he began, but the transmission was suddenly filled with static. On the Hyperion's bridge, deep within its systems, something ancient and patient began to wake up. The humans in their containers weren't just sleeping, they were changing. And now, after 75 years of waiting, it was time. The ship's AI, dormant but never truly asleep, had collected all the data it needed about its visitors. In the darkness of the bridge, status indicators began to glow with a soft, organic light, and the temperature started to rise. The hunt was about to begin. The static clearing from his communication system caught Vexica off guard. For a moment he had experienced something unprecedented. Complete silence on all frequencies. Even the background cosmic radiation that pervaded space had gone quiet. "Status report. All teams," he commanded, trying to keep the unease from his voice. The responses came in quickly, each team reporting similar communications disruptions throughout the ship. Third team, led by Scout Leader Rex, had penetrated deeper into the vessel's engineering sections. The architecture there was different, less ornate, more functional, but somehow more disturbing. The walls seemed to pulse with a subtle rhythm, like a sleeping beast's breathing. "Command, we're detecting thermal variations in the engineering sectors," Rex reported. "The ship, it's warming up." Vexica turned his attention back to the cryogenic chambers. The cloudy fluid inside was definitely becoming clearer, the frost on the exterior melting away to reveal more detail about the occupants within. What he saw made his scales tighten against his body. An instinctive reaction to danger, that his species had evolved eons ago. The humans weren't simply preserved. Their bodies showed signs of modification, subtle at first glance, but unmistakable upon closer inspection. Metallic implants merged seamlessly with organic tissue, and beneath their closed eyelids, occasional flickers of light pulsed in sync with the ship's emerging power signatures. "All teams, fall back to the hangar," Vexka ordered. His warrior's instincts, honed through decades of service to the Empire, were screaming at him to retreat. Something's not right here. But before any of the teams could acknowledge his order, the ship's internal lighting switched from emergency red to a deep, pulsing purple. The temperature continued to rise, and with it came a sound, not through their communication systems, but somehow directly in their minds. It was like a whale's song, if whales could sing about hunger and revenge. In the engineering section, Rex's team made a horrifying discovery. The walls weren't simply decorated with patterns. The patterns were moving, shifting like the surface of a liquid, despite being solid metal. As they watched, a section of the wall reached out, forming a tendril of living metal that grabbed the nearest soldier before anyone could react. "Unknown contact!" Rex screamed into his comm. "The ship! It's alive!" On the bridge, Vexka witnessed the cryogenic chambers beginning to drain. The fluid didn't simply empty, it was absorbed into the bodies of the sleeping crew members. As it disappeared, their modifications became even more apparent. What had looked like simple military augmentations were revealed to be something far more extensive and alien. The first of the crew members opened their eyes. They weren't human eyes at all, but complex optical organs that seemed to be a hybrid of organic and mechanical components. They glowed with the same purple light that now pulsed through the ship's corridors. "Command, requesting immediate extraction," Vexka transmitted to the Eternal Dominance. "The humans, they're not what we thought. The ship isn't what we thought. Nothing about this is what we thought." In the command center of the Eternal Dominance, Zixthar watched in horror as the sensor readings from the Hyperion began to spike. Power signatures were emerging from systems that hadn't even been detected in their initial scans. The ship's hull was changing, the battle damage healing itself, as if it were organic tissue. "Get them out of there," he ordered. "Now!" But it was too late. Throughout the Hyperion, the boarding teams found their retreat cut off by walls that moved like living things, by corridors that shifted and changed direction, and by an atmosphere that was rapidly becoming toxic to their biology. The ship wasn't just coming back to life, it was hunting them. The last transmission from Vexka came through broken and distorted. The humans, they didn't lose the war. They were waiting, evolving. "Emperor, save us all." Then, the Hyperion's primary systems came fully online. The massive ship began to move, its engines igniting with a purple fire that seemed to bend the light around it. The Gothic architecture was transforming, the metal gargoyles turning their heads to track the movement of the Krylaxian fleet, their mouths opening to reveal weapon systems that had never been seen before. The humans in their chambers were now fully awake, their bodies moving with an unnatural grace as they took their stations. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They were connected to each other and to the ship itself through their modifications, forming a single entity with a single purpose. As the Hyperion's weapons charged and its engines built to full power, a transmission was broadcast to the Krylaxian fleet. It contained no words, no demands, no threats. Instead, it was a symphony of mechanical and organic sounds that conveyed a single, clear message: the hunt had begun. The Relic wasn't just a remnant of a defeated civilization, it was a chrysalis, and what had emerged was beyond anything the Krylaxian Empire had prepared for. Their greatest victory had become their worst nightmare, and it was now fully awake. Captain Eleanor Wright's consciousness returned, like a tide washing over a frozen shore. 75 years of cryogenic sleep melted away in moments as neural pathways reactivated and enhanced synapses fired in rapid succession. Her eyes opened, no longer purely human, but featuring crystalline structures that processed light in ways evolution had never intended. The cryogenic chamber's fluid had already been absorbed into her modified body, its nanomachines integrating with her enhanced cellular structure. Around her, she could sense her crew awakening through the ship's neural network, 300 minds gradually reconnecting to form a collective consciousness that was both human and something else entirely. "Atlas," she spoke, her voice carrying both sound waves and data packets. "Status report." The ship's AI responded not in words, but in pure information, flooding her consciousness with 75 years of accumulated data. She saw everything through the AI's sensors. The decades of drifting, waiting for the right moment. The arrival of the Krylaxian fleet. The boarding party's fatal mistake. "They took the bait," she whispered, a smile playing across lips that now contained sensors capable of analyzing the chemical composition of the air, just as we planned. Around her, the crew chamber had transformed from its deceptively simple cryogenic appearance into what it truly was, a metamorphosis chamber. The walls pulsed with bioelectric energy, and strands of living metal reached out to assist awakening crew members. Each person's modifications was unique, adapted to their role in the ship's ecosystem. Lieutenant Commander James Harrison, her second in command, emerged from his chamber nearby. His modifications had focused on tactical systems. His right eye was now a complex targeting computer, and neural laces threaded through his brain gave him direct control over the ship's weapons. "The Krylaxians?" he asked, his voice carrying undertones of electromagnetic frequencies. "Exactly where we want them," Wright responded. "Their arrogance hasn't changed in 75 years. They still believe they won the war." Through the ship's systems, Wright accessed the exterior cameras. The Krylaxian fleet hung in space, their ships arranged in a standard combat formation. She could sense their confusion, their growing fear, as they realized the Hyperion was no longer the derelict they had thought it to be. "They're targeting us with conventional weapons," Harrison reported, amusement in his voice. "They still think we're the same humans they fought before." Wright made her way to the bridge, her movements fluid despite the decades of hibernation. The neural interface between her body and the ship allowed her to feel every system, every power fluctuation, every slight change in the vessel's living metal structure. The Hyperion wasn't just a ship, it was an extension of her own body, and the bodies of every crew member. The bridge had completely transformed from the Gothic cathedral that had fooled the Krylaxian boarding party. The ornate decorations had revealed their true nature, adaptive biological computers disguised as artistic flourishes. The command throne was now a direct neural interface point, surrounded by crew stations that looked more like organic growth than military equipment. "All hands," Wright broadcast through the ship's neural network. "Battle stations." The response was immediate and unanimous. 300 minds linked together, each connecting to their specialized systems. Engineers merged with the ship's power distribution network, their consciousness spreading through conduits that were part cable, part vein. Weapons officers connected to gun batteries that had disguised themselves as decorative gargoyles, feeling the charging energy as if it were their own heartbeat. Through the neural network, Wright could feel the Hyperion awakening fully. The ship's true nature was revealing itself, and the sight was terrible to behold. The Gothic architecture began to shift, the seemingly solid metal flowing like liquid. The gargoyles turned their heads, tracking the Krylaxian vessels with predatory intent. Hull plates rippled as repair systems activated, molecular reconstructors rebuilding damaged sections with materials scavenged from the Krylaxian boarding party's equipment. "They're hailing us," Harrison reported. Wright allowed the transmission through. Commander Zixithar's four-eyed face appeared on a view screen composed of crystalline structures that had grown from the bridge's ceiling. "Unknown vessel," the Krylaxian commander began, his voice heavy with forced authority. "You will power down your systems and prepare to be boarded. This ship is now property of the Krylaxian Empire." Wright's response was not in words. Instead, she allowed the ship's consciousness to respond directly. The Hyperion broadcast on all frequencies, its message a combination of mechanical harmonics and biological rhythms that spoke of hunger, of revenge, of 75 years of patient evolution. The effect on the Krylaxian fleet was immediate. Their ships began to back away, their formation breaking as primal instincts overrode military training. They could sense, on a level beyond conscious thought, that they were no longer the hunters. "Watch closely," Wright commanded her crew through the neural network. "Remember their fear. Remember what they did to Earth, to our colonies, to our people. Remember why we chose to become this." The Hyperion's weapons were unlike anything the Krylaxians had ever encountered. What they had assumed were traditional gun emplacements were actually growth nodes, capable of generating weapons that adapted to their targets in real time. The first demonstration came when a Krylaxian cruiser attempted to open fire. Before the enemy ship could discharge its weapons, the Hyperion's defense systems analyzed its shield frequencies and grew crystalline structures that perfectly countered them. The cruiser's shields might as well have been non-existent. The living metal of the Hyperion reached out, tendrils of adaptive material breaching the distance between ships in violation of known physics. "By the Emperor," Zixithar's voice crackled through the comm. "What are you?" "We are humanity's answer to extinction," Wright responded, her voice carrying harmonics that made the Krylaxian's secondary heart stop beating. "We are what you created when you tried to destroy us. We are evolution's response to your empire." The tendrils made contact with the cruiser's hull. Instead of traditional weapons fire, they began to transform the enemy ship's very structure. Krylaxian technology was being converted, absorbed, integrated into the Hyperion's ever-growing mass. The screams of the cruiser's crew echoed through space as their own ship turned against them, its corridors becoming digestive systems that processed both organic and mechanical material for the Hyperion's use. "All those years," Wright broadcast to the horrified fleet, "while you thought we were dying out on our colony, worlds, we were changing. The Hyperion wasn't just a ship, it was an incubator. And now we're ready to show you what humanity can really become." The neural network pulsed with the combined satisfaction of 300 minds as they watched the Krylaxian fleet's formation collapse into chaos. Ships began to flee, their crews overwhelmed by terror as they witnessed their comrades being consumed and transformed by what they had mistaken for a simple derelict. But the Hyperion was far from finished. Its hull had increased in mass by 30%, just from absorbing the single cruiser, and with each new piece of Krylaxian technology it consumed, it adapted and evolved. The Gothic architecture was now merely a memory, replaced by a constantly shifting form that defied traditional spacecraft design. "Pursue?" Harrison asked, his targeting systems already calculating intercept trajectories. Wright smiled, feeling the ship's hunger resonating with her own desire for revenge. "No," she said, "let them run. Let them tell others what they saw here. The hunt is just beginning, and fear is our best weapon." The Hyperion's engines ignited with purple fire, but it didn't immediately give chase. Instead, it began a metamorphosis that would prepare it for the long hunt to come. The ship and its crew were no longer bound by the limitations of traditional space travel or human biology. They had become something new, something that would haunt the Krylaxian Empire's nightmares. As the enemy fleet retreated in disarray, Wright accessed the ship's long-range sensors. Somewhere out there were the Krylaxian core worlds, the heart of the Empire that had tried to exterminate humanity. They thought themselves safe behind their defenses, their fleets, their technological superiority. They had no idea what was coming. Through the neural network, Wright shared her thoughts with her crew. They weren't just going to fight the Krylaxians. They were going to hunt them. Every ship they caught would make them stronger. Every piece of technology they absorbed would help them evolve. Every survivor they allowed to escape would spread the terror further. The Hyperion pulsed with anticipation, its living metal humming with potential as it digested its first prey. The ship and its crew had waited 75 years for this moment. Now, the galaxy would learn why it should have feared the humans all along. Deep in the Carina Nebula's purple-tinged clouds, the Krylaxian defense fleet maintained a tight formation. After the disaster at the derelict ship encounter, Command had tripled the size of their patrols. 20 warships now moved together, their sensors sweeping space for any sign of the nightmare vessel that had consumed their sister ship. Fleet Admiral Kazathul stood on the bridge of the Imperial Dominion, his claws leaving marks on the command rail as he gripped it. 3 weeks had passed since the Hyperion revealed itself, and the stories had spread through the Empire like a virus. Ships were going missing. Distress calls would be received, only to find empty vessels drifting in space. Their crews and much of their technology simply gone. "Contact!" The sensor operator's voice cracked with tension. "Bearing 17 Mark 4. "Show me," Kazathul commanded. The holographic display flickered to life, showing nothing. Just the nebula's gases and distant stars. "It was there," the operator insisted. "A mass reading larger than a dreadnought, but it vanished." Kazathul's scales rippled with unease. The Hyperion had been learning, evolving. Each encounter made it stronger, more cunning. It didn't just take technology and biomass from its victims. It absorbed their knowledge, their tactical data, their very essence. A new alert sounded, a transmission coming in on all frequencies. But instead of words or data, it was music. An ancient human composition played through the ship's speakers, the sound distorted and wrong. The Dies Irae, Kazathul's xenomusicology training, provided a human funeral mass. "Multiple contacts," the sensor operator screamed. "They're everywhere." The holographic display exploded with signals. The Hyperion seemed to be in a dozen places at once, appearing and disappearing like a ghost in the nebula's clouds. Each reading was slightly different, some larger, some smaller, some showing impossible energy signatures. "It's toying with us," Kazathul realized, "showing us what it can do." The music changed, becoming something else. The screams of Krylaxian crews, their final moments preserved and repurposed as psychological warfare. Kazathul recognized voices. Commander Zixthar, veteran hunter Vexka, crews from ships that had gone missing in the past weeks. "Break formation," Kazathul ordered. "Scatter pattern delta. Don't let it." The nebula itself seemed to reach out with tendrils of plasma, wrapping around 3 ships at the formation's edge. As the fleet watched in horror, the ships' hulls began to ripple and change, the metal flowing like liquid. The Hyperion had learned to project its transformative abilities through the very gases of the nebula. "Emperor, preserve us," someone whispered on the bridge. The 3 trapped ships dissolved, their material and crews absorbed into something that was gradually taking shape in the nebula. The Hyperion emerged, but it was different again. Now, nearly 3 kilometers long, its hull was a shifting maze of Gothic architecture and organic curves. The gargoyles had multiplied, each one different, each one crafted from the memories and matter of consumed crews. Captain Wright's voice echoed through their ships, layered with harmonics that spoke directly to the Krylaxians' deepest instincts. "Your empire taught us something valuable," she said. "Survival isn't about strength, it's about adaptation." The remaining ships opened fire. their energy weapons and projectiles spraying into space, but the Hyperion's hull simply absorbed the attacks, analysing the weapon's properties and incorporating them into its own structure. What had once been decorative spires were now weapon systems that perfectly countered Krylaxian shields. "Fascinating technology," Wright's voice continued, as casual as if she were discussing the weather. "We'll make good use of it." The Hyperion's next attack was precise and devastating. Tendrils of living metal shot out, penetrating the hulls of 5 more ships simultaneously, but instead of consuming them immediately, the tendrils interfaced with their computer systems. Navigation controls were overridden. The 5 ships turned their weapons on their own fleet. "Stop," Kazathil broadcast. "We surrender, please." "Surrender?" The sound of Wright's laughter was like ice breaking. "No, Admiral, this isn't about conquest. This is about teaching a lesson." Through the neural network, Wright shared her satisfaction with her crew. The Krylaxians were learning what it meant to be hunted, to be treated as inferior beings worthy only of exploitation. The same way they had treated humanity. The Hyperion's form shifted again, parts of its structure becoming translucent, revealing the inner changes. Krylaxian technology and biological material were being broken down and reconstructed. The ship was incorporating the best elements of both species, creating something entirely new. "Run," Wright commanded the remaining ships. "Run back to your empire. Tell them what you saw here. Tell them how your mighty fleet was reduced to prey. Tell them that every ship you send against us makes us stronger. And tell them we're just getting started." The surviving Krylaxian ships fled, their engines straining past safety limits. Behind them, the Hyperion's laughter echoed through space, the combined voices of its crew, the absorbed consciousness of its victims, and the ship's own evolving awareness. In the aftermath of the Nebula battle, the Hyperion underwent another transformation. The absorbed Krylaxian technology had included their latest cloaking systems, but the ship's hybrid nature took the concept further. Instead of simply bending light around its hull, the Hyperion's surface began developing chromatophores like those found in Earth cephalopods. The ship could now alter its appearance at will, becoming virtually invisible, or displaying false images to confuse enemy sensors. But Wright and her crew had something more insidious in mind. "Their psychology is the key," Lieutenant Commander Harrison observed during a strategy session. His targeting systems had evolved to track quantum probability states, letting him see where enemies were likely to flee. "They're an empire built on the belief in their own superiority. We're not just killing them, we're destroying their entire worldview." The bridge had become a living thing, its surfaces constantly shifting to create optimal neural interfaces for the crew's evolving needs. Wright stood in the command center, her modified nervous system directly connected to the ship's sensory array. She could feel the vibrations of distant engines, taste radiation patterns, see in spectrums that human eyes had never been meant to process. "Then, let's give them something to really fear," she decided. The Hyperion began its psychological warfare campaign in earnest. It would appear in systems across the Empire, but never quite the same way twice. Sometimes it was a massive cathedral of war, its Gothic architecture exaggerated to nightmarish proportions. Other times it was barely visible, a suggestion of movement in the void, a shadow that sensors couldn't quite pin down. But its most terrifying aspect was the voices. The ship had absorbed not just the bodies and technology of its victims, but fragments of their consciousness as well. Wright and her crew learned to access these memories, to weave them into broadcasts that would break the morale of any Krylaxian ship they encountered. They would transmit the final moments of destroyed crews, their screams mixed with human Baroque music. They would piece together messages using the voices of long-dead commanders, making it seem as if the dead were warning the living. The ship's AI, Atlas, developed algorithms to predict which combinations would have the maximum psychological impact on different targets. "Patrol fleet detected," Harrison announced one day, his cybernetic systems tracking a group of ships at extreme range. "They're escorting a research vessel, reading multiple labs. They're studying us." Wright smiled. The Krylaxians were trying to understand what they were dealing with, to find some weakness they could exploit. "Let's give them some data to analyze." The Hyperion emerged from its quantum probability state directly in the patrol fleet's path, but this time it presented itself differently. The ship's surface became transparent in sections, revealing the hybrid internal structures that defied known physics. The crew, visible through the transparent hull, were clearly no longer purely human. Their modifications had progressed, their bodies adapting alongside the ship. The patrol fleet's reactions were predictable. Half the ships immediately fled, while the others opened fire. Their weapons were more advanced than previous encounters, specifically designed to counter the Hyperion's observed capabilities. "They're learning," Wright noted with approval, "but so are we." The Hyperion's hull absorbed the new weapon's energy, its hybrid structure analyzing and adapting in real time. Within seconds, it had developed countermeasures. Within minutes, it had repurposed the attack for its own use. The research vessel tried to escape, but the Hyperion had developed something new. Tendrils of probability itself reached out, grabbing the ship from multiple quantum states simultaneously. The vessel was trapped not just in normal space, but in several possible realities at once. "Welcome to evolution," Wright broadcast to the doomed ship. The scientists aboard would have just enough time to realize that their studies had made them the perfect target. The Hyperion didn't just want their technology, it wanted their knowledge, their understanding of its nature. It wanted to know how they thought it could be defeated, so it could evolve beyond those weaknesses. The absorption process had become more efficient. The Hyperion's hull opened like a blooming flower, revealing chambers that were part organic, part mechanical. The research vessel was drawn in, its structure beginning to dissolve even before it was fully engulfed. The screams of its crew were carefully recorded and categorized, ready to be used in future psychological warfare. As the remaining patrol ships fled, Wright accessed the absorbed data through her neural interface. The Krylaxian scientists had been studying the Hyperion's transformation abilities, trying to understand the principles behind its evolution. Their theories, now incorporated into the ship's own understanding, would make the next evolution even more dramatic. "They still think they can beat us with technology," Harrison observed, his targeting systems already adapting based on the new information. "They don't understand what we've become." Wright watched the fleeing ships through the ship's evolved sensors. The Hyperion had transcended simple physical form. It was becoming something that existed in multiple states simultaneously, a quantum nightmare that defied conventional military doctrine. "Send them a message," she commanded. "Let them hear their scientists' last thoughts, mixed with human classical music. Something appropriate." The ship's AI selected Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries, distorting it through layers of quantum probability until it barely resembled music at all. The broadcast went out on all frequencies, a symphony of terror that would haunt the dreams of every Krylaxian who heard it. The hunt was evolving, becoming more than just revenge. The Hyperion and its crew were charting a course for the future of human evolution itself, using their enemy's own fear to fuel their transformation. In the void between stars, a new kind of entity was taking shape. Part ship, part crew, part absorbed victims, all merged into something that the galaxy had never seen before. And they were still hunting. In the depths of an uncharted nebula, the Hyperion underwent its most dramatic transformation yet. The ship had grown to nearly 4 kilometers in length, its mass increased by the absorbed technology and biomatter of dozens of Krylaxian vessels. But size was the least of its changes. Captain Wright stood in what had once been the bridge, though that term no longer accurately described the space. The room had become a synapse in the ship's neural network, its walls alive with pulsing bioluminescent patterns that matched the crew's brainwaves. Her own body had continued to evolve alongside the ship. Her skin now contained the same light-absorbing material that made the Hyperion nearly invisible to sensors. "Status report," she commanded, her voice carrying through both audio and neural channels. Lieutenant Commander Harrison's response came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Like most of the crew, he had largely abandoned his humanoid form. His consciousness existed as a distributed network throughout the ship's tactical systems, allowing him to process combat data with unprecedented speed. "The integration of the quantum drive technology from the research vessel is complete," he reported. "We can now exist in multiple probability states simultaneously. The Krylaxians won't be able to predict where or when we'll strike." Wright accessed the ship's external sensors, observing their latest evolution. The Hyperion's hull was no longer solid in any conventional sense. Instead, it was a constantly shifting lattice of organic metal that could reconfigure itself instantly to adapt to any threat. The Gothic architecture that had once been their disguise was now just one of countless forms they could assume. The crew's transformation had been equally profound. The original 300 humans had become something far beyond their original species. Some, like Harrison, had become living software. Their consciousness spread through the ship's systems. Others had evolved into hybrid forms that could survive in any environment, their bodies capable of interfacing directly with any technology they encountered. "Show me the latest intercepts," Wright commanded. The neural network filled her consciousness with data streams from across the Krylaxian Empire. Their fear had spread faster than even the Hyperion could travel. Trade routes were being abandoned. Colonies were being fortified. The mighty empire that had once threatened humanity with extinction was now jumping at shadows. But it was their attempts to understand the Hyperion that truly fascinated Wright. Krylaxian scientists had developed dozens of theories about the ship's nature, each more desperate than the last. Some believed it was a weapon developed by ancient precursor races. Others theorized it was a manifestation of collective human consciousness, given form through unknown technology. None of them had guessed the truth, that the Hyperion was the result of humanity's determination to survive at any cost, to evolve beyond the limitations that had made them vulnerable to extinction in the first place. "They're adapting their weapons," Harrison reported, his consciousness briefly coalescing into a visible form. "The latest intercepted designs show attempts to target our quantum state shifting." Wright smiled, her modified features reflecting the ship's bioluminescent patterns. "Show me." The neural network displayed the Krylaxian weapon designs. They were impressive devices capable of locking an object into a single quantum state, preventing the probability shifts that had made the Hyperion so difficult to combat. In theory, they could force the ship to remain solid long enough to be destroyed by conventional weapons. "Begin countermeasure evolution," Wright commanded. The ship's hybrid systems went to work, combining the knowledge absorbed from countless victims with their own evolving technology. The Hyperion's structure began to change again, developing new layers of complexity. Instead of shifting between quantum states, it learned to exist in all of them at once, a paradox given physical form. The transformation was beautiful and terrifying to behold. The ship's outer layer developed what looked like scales, each one a microscopic probability engine, capable of generating its own quantum field. The combined effect made the Hyperion appear to shimmer in and out of reality, leaving after images across multiple dimensions. News of the Hyperion's latest evolution spread through the Krylaxian Empire like a plague of terror. Long-range sensors captured glimpses of the ship that defied analysis. It would appear as a massive war cathedral one moment, a sleek predator the next, and sometimes as nothing more than a distortion in space-time itself. In the Krylaxian High Command Center on their throne world, Emperor Vaxithor reviewed the latest reports with growing dread. The tactical display showed a pattern of disappearances spreading outward from the initial contact point like ripples in a pond of darkness. The outer colonies are requesting additional protection, his military advisor reported. The trading guilds are threatening to suspend all operations in affected sectors. The Emperor's four eyes narrowed as he studied the pattern. They're not just hunting our ships, he realized. They're hunting our confidence, our sense of security. Reports continued to flood in from across the Empire. A mining colony on the rim reported seeing ghost images of Gothic architecture in the asteroids around their base. When ships were sent to investigate, they found the asteroids had been transformed into quantum state sculptures. Their mineral composition altered at the atomic level to record the screams of previous victims. A military academy reported that their tactical training simulations had been infected with something that could only be described as nightmares. The simulation computers showed their cadets what it felt like to be absorbed by the Hyperion, the experience drawn from the actual memories of consumed crews. The Hyperion had become more than just a ship. It was becoming a legend, a ghost story that Krylaxian children whispered about in their sleep cycles. Parents warned that if their offspring didn't behave, the human ship would come for them, its quantum probability engines reaching through space and time to drag them into its ever-evolving form. On the Hyperion itself, Wright and her crew watched the spread of terror with satisfaction. The ship's neural network had expanded to include quantum entanglement communications, allowing them to monitor the Empire's deteriorating morale in real time. They're beginning to understand, Wright observed, her form shifting between solid and probabilistic states as she interfaced with the ship's systems. Not just fear us, but understand what we represent. The crew's integration with the ship had reached new levels. They were no longer just controlling the vessel. They had become aspects of its consciousness, their individual personalities contributing to a greater whole that existed across multiple quantum states simultaneously. Harrison's distributed consciousness assembled temporarily, taking on a form that combined human and ship aesthetics. The border worlds are starting to rebel, he reported. They believe their emperor can't protect them from us. Some are even trying to contact us, offering tribute in exchange for protection. Wright accessed the quantum probability engines, viewing potential futures branching out before them. The Hyperion's evolution had given them more than just physical power. It had given them the ability to shape the future itself. Send them our response, she commanded. The ship broadcast across all frequencies, its message carried by quantum entanglement to every corner of the Empire. But instead of words or threats, it transmitted understanding. It showed the Krylaxians what humanity had become. Not just a species fighting for survival, but evolution itself given purpose and direction. The message was clear. The Hyperion wasn't just a weapon of revenge. It was a glimpse of the future, a future where the boundaries between organic and mechanical, between solid matter and quantum probability, between individual and collective, no longer existed, and that future was hunting them. Throughout the Empire, Krylaxian ships began deserting their posts. The mere rumour of the Hyperion's presence in a system was enough to send entire fleets into retreat. The Empire that had once thought itself invincible was being unmade not just by fear, but by the realization that they had created something beyond their comprehension. The ship continued to evolve, each transformation bringing it closer to something that transcended traditional understanding. The Gothic architecture that had once been its disguise, became just one of infinite possible forms, all existing simultaneously in quantum superposition. Wright stood in the neural nexus. Her consciousness merged with the ship's systems and felt the fear of an entire empire flowing through the quantum probability fields. They had become something more than just hunters or avengers. They had become the future, reaching back through time to show their enemies the price of their arrogance. The hunt was no longer just about revenge. It was about evolution, about showing the galaxy what humanity could become when pushed to its absolute limits. The Hyperion and its crew had transcended their original purpose, becoming something that would haunt the nightmares of species for generations to come. And somewhere, in the quantum probability fields that now made up their existence, they were still changing, still evolving, still becoming something more. The Krylaxian Grand Fleet assembled above their throne world, Imperius Prime. 5,000 ships, from nimble corvettes to massive dreadnoughts, formed a defensive sphere around the planet. Emperor Vaxithor had called in every available vessel, stripping defenses from across the Empire for this final stand. In the quantum realm, the Hyperion watched. The ship had grown to over 5 kilometers in length, though physical dimensions meant little now. Its form shifted constantly between states of matter, its crew existing as quantum patterns as much as physical beings. Captain Wright's consciousness expanded through the ship's neural network, analysing the Krylaxian defences. Her human form had become optional. She could manifest as anything from a traditional humanoid to a living constellation of quantum possibilities. "They've developed new weapons," Harrison reported, his distributed awareness detecting energy signatures that hadn't existed weeks ago. Quantum state disruptors, probability anchors, dimensional stabilizers. They're trying to force us to exist in a single reality. Wright allowed herself a moment of appreciation for their enemy's ingenuity. The Krylaxians had poured all their technological prowess into these defenses, creating weapons that could theoretically counter the Hyperion's evolutionary advantages. "Show me the crew status," she commanded. The neural network displayed the state of her 300 crew members. None of them could be considered human anymore. They had evolved alongside the ship, becoming hybrid entities that existed across multiple quantum states. Some had merged completely with ship systems. Their consciousness spread through vast networks of living metal and energy fields. Others maintained humanoid forms but could shift between states of matter at will. "We're ready," came the collective response, 300 voices speaking as one through the quantum link. The Hyperion began its approach, but not through normal space. The ship had evolved beyond the need for conventional movement. Instead, it shifted through quantum possibilities, appearing simultaneously at multiple points around the Krylaxian fleet. "By the Emperor's crown," gasped a Krylaxian commander as his sensors overloaded. "It's everywhere." Indeed, the Hyperion now existed as a quantum superposition, each manifestation slightly different. Some appeared as the Gothic war cathedral it had once been, others as organic shapes that defied description, and still others as tears in the fabric of reality itself. The Krylaxian fleet opened fire, their new weapons creating disruption fields designed to force the Hyperion into a single quantum state. Energy beams and probability anchors crisscrossed space, trying to pin down something that existed in all possible states simultaneously. Wright felt the attacks through the ship's quantum neural interface. The weapons were impressive. They actually succeeded in forcing small portions of the Hyperion structure into fixed states. But that was exactly what they had been waiting for. "Now," Wright commanded, "show them what we've become." The Hyperion's response defied the laws of physics as the Krylaxians understood them. Instead of resisting the quantum state disruptors, the ship absorbed them, incorporating their effects into its own evolution. Each attempt to force it into a single reality created a new set of quantum possibilities. The ship's form began to change again, but this time it was different. The Gothic architecture that had been their signature transformed into something that existed between realities. The gargoyles became quantum probability engines, each one capable of generating its own pocket universe. The ship's hull developed layers that existed in different timelines simultaneously. "Impossible!" screamed the Krylaxian weapons officers as their targeting systems crashed, unable to process what they were seeing. The Hyperion had become something beyond their comprehension, a quantum horror that could exist in all possible states until observed, and then change the very nature of that observation. The crew were no longer merely controlling the ship. They had become quantum wave functions themselves, their consciousness spread across multiple realities. Emperor Vaxithor watched from his command center as his grand fleet engaged the nightmare that humanity had become. His finest scientists had warned him that the Hyperion's evolution might have progressed beyond their ability to combat, but seeing it firsthand was different. "What are they?" he whispered as another group of ships disappeared into what looked like a quantum probability storm. As if in answer, Captain Wright's voice echoed through every communication system in the fleet. But it wasn't just her voice. It was a chorus of human and hybrid sounds, layered with quantum harmonics that spoke directly to the primitive parts of the Krylaxian brain. "We are humanity's response to extinction," the voice said. "Not a weapon, not a ship, but a new path of evolution. You tried to end our species, but instead, you forced us to transcend it." The truth of the Hyperion project began to unfold through the quantum neural network, broadcast to every Krylaxian mind in range. They saw the memories of the ship's creation, the desperate plan that had seemed like madness 75 years ago. Humanity hadn't built the Hyperion as a conventional warship. They had created it as an evolutionary engine, a means to force their own species to adapt beyond the constraints of physical form. The Gothic architecture, the apparent damage, the sleeping crew, all had been part of an elaborate metamorphosis chamber. "Your victory in the war was necessary," Wright continued, her form manifesting as a quantum probability cloud that existed in multiple times and spaces simultaneously. "It gave us the isolation we needed to complete our evolution." The Hyperion's attacks took on new meaning as the Krylaxians understood what they were witnessing. The ship wasn't just destroying their fleet. It was offering glimpses of potential futures, showing them paths of evolution they had never imagined. Some of the Krylaxian crews began to understand, their minds opening to the quantum possibilities the Hyperion represented. These ships stopped firing, their crews transfixed by the revelation that they were witnessing not just an enemy's revenge, but the next step in galactic evolution. But Emperor Vaxithor would not accept this new reality. "Launch the dimensional bombs," he commanded. "Tear that abomination back into normal space." The bombs detonated, ripping holes in space-time itself. For a moment, the Hyperion's quantum state wavered, its multiple manifestations starting to collapse into a single reality. But that was when Wright and her crew revealed their final evolution. The ship didn't fight the dimensional collapse. Instead, it used the energy to trigger its own transformation. The quantum probability storm that the Hyperion had become suddenly focused, condensing into something that existed at the intersection of all possible realities. "This was never about destroying your empire," Wright's voice echoed through quantum space. "It was about showing the galaxy what life can become when pushed to its absolute limits." The Hyperion's form stabilized into something that defied description, a quantum cathedral that existed simultaneously in all possible states, its crew manifesting as beings of pure probability and potential. The Gothic architecture that had once been their disguise became a framework for reality itself. each gargoyle a window into another possible universe. Emperor Vaxithor watched in horror as his flagship began to change, the Hyperion's quantum influence spreading through his fleet like a viral evolution. Ships transformed, their crews experiencing forced quantum acceleration as humanity's gift to the galaxy revealed its true purpose. "You wanted to end us," Wright said, her consciousness now spread across 1,000 quantum possibilities. "Instead, you helped us become the future, and now that future belongs to everyone." The quantum storm engulfed the entire fleet, not destroying, but transforming. The Krylaxians who accepted the change began their own metamorphosis, their forms shifting between states of matter and consciousness. Those who resisted found themselves trapped in pocket universes, preserved as examples for future species who might consider the path of extinction over evolution. In the end, the Hyperion's revenge wasn't destruction. It was transcendence. The ship and its crew had become living proof that evolution couldn't be stopped, only guided. They had become the bridge between what life was and what it could become. The story of the Hyperion spread through the galaxy, but not as a tale of terror. It became a legend of transformation, a reminder that the universe had infinite possibilities for those willing to embrace change. The ship itself became a quantum nexus, appearing wherever species faced the choice between stagnation and evolution. Its crew, no longer bound by physical form or linear time, continued their journey through multiple realities, watching and guiding the galaxy's development. The Krylaxian Empire transformed, its people learning to exist across quantum states. Their consciousness expanded beyond the limitations of their original forms. The Gothic architecture of their cities took on new meaning, each building a probability engine contributing to their continuing evolution. And somewhere in the quantum probability fields, Captain Wright and her crew continued their patrol, not as hunters seeking revenge, but as guardians of possibility, ensuring that no species would ever again mistake technological superiority for evolutionary destiny. The human ship that had terrified an alien fleet had become something more, a quantum legend that existed in all possible realities, a reminder that the greatest revenge against extinction is not destruction, but transcendence. In the end, the Hyperion achieved something far greater than revenge. It showed the galaxy that horror could give birth to hope, that fear could forge the future, and that even in the darkest spaces between stars, evolution would find a way to thrive.